Hey everybody, welcome to this week's installment of Raising Millionaires. I am Roger Bryan and this is
I'm Richard Lorenzen.
and today we are going to talk about everyone's favorite topic. You talk about it at the dinner table, you talk about it to yourself when you're going to the bathroom. It is compound
Compound
interest.
interest.
What is it? Why does it matter? And why does Warren Buffett say it's the eighth great wonder of the world? Richard, do you want to start us off with a little bit of an overview of what compound interest is?
Yeah, I think when you break it down at the simplest level, compound interest is basically just it's explaining the process of how a return on your money the grows over time, right? And so if you think about it as the simplest one I could think of would be like a savings account, right? And let's say you have a savings account and you put $100 into that savings account, and let's say that we're living
Can
in
you at
very
least change it to a money market or a CD? Because if anybody watching this has a savings account, they should turn this off. Jump off of a no, don't jump off of it.
That's
Just
why we're here. But
yeah, okay,
uh,
okay, but just let's not say savings account.
but
Come
just
on,
to,
go
to
for it.
keep this simple, you have $100 in some kind of account, and that account is yielding. To keep it simple, let's say 10%. Well, if this is let's say that
Oh,
we're,
I'll
we're
take that
living in
offer
fairy
all day
tales and
long.
unicorns, and you're generating a 10% yield. So year one, $100 in your account, you generate 10%. So that's another $10 added into your account in interest. So at the end of that year, you have $110. Year two, again, you're going to have that 10% interest rate, but you're making not just 10% on the $100, but you're also making 10% on that additional $10 that you generated from year one. And so in year two, you're generating 10% on $110, so you're getting $11 instead of $10. And that process continues on and on, assuming that you leave that money in the account and you don't touch it. It continues on year after year, and each year your return also grows because the size of the principal is growing. And so that's how it works. And the beauty of it is that over time you can see a very small amount of money compound into a very large amount of money because of the growth that's happening in the rate of return because the principal gets bigger. I don't know if that's a great
No, it makes
explanation, but
perfect sense,
that's
and I know it's a core part of the early strategy for raising millionaires and give your kids financial freedom. In that the earlier you start putting money away into these types of compound interest accounts, say for your kids, the longevity of life allows that compound mint to be significantly greater. Now,
right.
there's multiple different rules and strategies and theories around this. You've got the 4% rule, you've got the rule of seven, you've got how this works inside of cash flow life insurance or whole life cash value life insurance. What are some of the strategies that you use in planning for your kids specifically that takes advantage of compound interest? Because I've got mine, which I'd love to
Right.
talk about. What are some of yours?
Right. So when you think about compound interest, right? Like I think what a lot of people should the starting point for a lot of people should be, if you're investing money, right? And you're building out a plan for your wealth and for your kids' wealth, and generational wealth, you're probably thinking about yeah, the place you should probably be starting is what is your goal for that? Like what is the amount of wealth that you're trying to generate and why? And so you've got to figure out whether it's you're building wealth for financial freedom, right? You want to have enough wealth that you can no longer have to work, and you can live off of that money in perpetuity, and it keeps generating cash flow. Or maybe you want to pay for your child's college or their first car or a house. And so when figuring out that goal, I think the most relevant strategy here to think about is probably the 4% rule, which is something I think about a lot when figuring out like different milestones that I want to plan for. And basically, the 4% rule says that when you have an investment account or some sort of pool of money that's invested somewhere and it's generating returns. Let's say it's in the stock market. The rule of four says that you can withdraw from that account up to 4% of that money each year to whether it's funding your lifestyle, funding college for your kids, whatever the goal is. You can withdraw up to 4% from that account each year, and because of compound interest, that account will still continue to grow in perpetuity. And the idea is that in theory you won't run out of money if you stay within that 4% rule with your withdrawals. And so, it's kind of a benchmark. It's a benchmark that also takes into account that, generally speaking, the historical rate of return in equities, and if you invest in the S&P 500 over 30 plus years, is an average of about 8 to 9%. And so it basically, with the 4% rule, is it's looking at how much can I take out of my account each year, where the stock market or my investment will still grow enough to replace that money plus grow some more. And so that's how the 4% rule works, and it can kind of become a North Star for you with figuring out if I want to pay for my child's college, or if I want to buy them a house in 30 years, how much money do I need to accumulate, and how much do I need to be investing each month, and what rate does it need to compound at to be able to reach that goal?
Yeah, and a big part of that is to use some numbers. So let's say you have $1 million in an account, right? And you've got it in an instrument that pays 4.5% per year, which is it. Like, you can lock in a 30-year around that. Maybe I'd have to look at the numbers again. Don't quote me on that. But if it's 4.5% and you take out 4%, basically you could take out $40,000 a year from that $1 million, and in perpetuity, you'd always have that $1 million. You'd never actually go into principal. And if you can fund something off of that, say your lifestyle in combination with other cash flow, then you'll always have that safety net there. I think that there's always the conversation about, for me, I'm a cash flow investor, so I might not be looking to stack as much money into equities or investments as I used to. I think I've shifted as I've gotten older and found that I want that money at work actively, typically through real estate, because although I might have a smaller amount of net liquid cash, that I get the double compoundment of the increase in value of the underlying asset, plus the free cash flow, which then can be reinvested. And I see that it's got an exponentially greater return over, say, a 10 or 20-year period. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. Now, for me, for the kids, the way that I look at this is inside of their whole life policies, their cash flow life insurance policies, they're getting a 4% rate of return right now on it. What's nice is as that starts to compound and I pay the premiums at 13 years, right, the amount of money that I've paid in becomes less than the amount of money that it's worth, meaning the cash value that can be withdrawn. By the time they turn 62 or 67, I'd have to pull up the chart, right? They could buy a house off of it or borrow against it to buy the house because of compound interest. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to tie the strategy, right, of compound interest to the instrument of whole life insurance to the outcome, which is, right, they've got this huge nest egg of life insurance. They don't have to worry about term life later in life. They don't have to worry about how their loved ones are going to be taken care of, right? They've got this one instrument that solves so many stressful problems for people. I don't know how many parents I talk to in their 30s, 40s, or even 50s that are way underinsured. And if they were to pass while their kids are 15 or 16, the house would be gone, college wouldn't get paid for, right? And it's such an inexpensive thing. And the earlier you do it, the easier and less expensive it is. The amount of money that I pay for my kids to have that potential nest egg, if I was to buy the same policy today for myself, it would be 30 times more expensive, 30 times more expensive, not 30 times more expensive to get that same type of nest egg coverage from a life insurance perspective that it covers for them. Why? Right. Compound interest.
Yeah, no matter what instrument you use, the key to leveraging compound interest is that you have to start as early as possible. The best time to start is now. The Chinese proverb, I think, that says the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. You have
is it a proverb or a proverb?
Should we go back and fix that?
No, I was just wondering if you say potato or potato.
No, I think I just was thinking out loud and.
Okay, I was like, maybe, I don't know. Maybe he knows something I don't. Next time we're out at dinner and you order potatoes, I'll understand.
Tomatoes.
I would like some tomatoes with my potatoes. Okay, sorry. Keep going.
But yeah, the idea is that you have to start earlier because over time, as the principal grows, the returns get bigger and bigger. But you can only get to that point if you start really early on and you have that amount of time to allow it to compound. I think the rule of thumb is, for equities, is something like, if you invest in an index, let's say an S&P index fund, it roughly doubles every 10 years.
This is a good byproduct segue. I learned early, like in my teens. I don't remember where the strategy came from, but it was the rule of sevens. If you can get a 7% rate of return, your money will double every 7 years. So you don't even need 10% in 10 years. It's 7 and 7.
So it's even
because of
less
compounding interest. So if you think about that and you look at a child who is 1, and you could put away $10,000 for them, and it's going to double every 7 years. By the time they're 50, 49 years later, 7 times 7. Now that compounds though. So it's 10, 20, 40, 80, 160, 320, $640,000 by the time they're that age using the rule of 7. That's freaking huge. And the S&P historically is returning greater than that. So $10,000 in the S&P for them in their first year of life, by the time they're 50, $640,000 in not inflation adjusted, which of course changes things, but.
No. Well, that's also a good point to think about, like, for when you're thinking about your budget and you're thinking about your savings rate, you're thinking about, where your money's currently going. Something good to think about is for every dollar that you're spending on something right now, instead of looking at that as I'm spending $1, it's just $1. Think about what that dollar is worth over 30 years of compounding. Let's say it's $10.
You say my coffee's costing me $7 a day.
Exactly. So like
I only pay $1.
Your $10 Starbucks is costing you $10 a day. That's 100 future dollars, right?
I'm going to tell Rhonda at McDonald's you said to stop buying coffee because it's too expensive in the future.
But it's true though, right? Like think about every dollar that you spend is worth, maybe it's worth like $10 30 years from now. So, that $200 that you're about to blow on whatever it might be, if it's $2,000 invested over 30 years, is it really worth giving up that future $2,000? So,
and I know we've been talking a lot about how Gen Z looks at this, is we're integrating more with them into both the workforce and investment strategies.
Yep.
And I think back to when I was in my 20s, and I look at a lot of the people that are my age now and the things that they did in their 20s. I've never met the guy who bought the Ferrari or Lamborghini in their 20s that didn't regret it in their 30s when they matured a little bit, right? They thought it was a lot of fun, but that $250,000, although the decrease in value isn't as significant on a high-end car like that, the compound rate of return, that car cost them $1 million in about 10 or 15 years. Yep. So, and every one of them regrets it. Every single one of them, right? The joy that they think they get out of it is usually flushed down the toilet the first time they get a $2,400 oil change.
Yep. Yeah. Why make it, if you're a person who, you're trying to build long-term wealth, why make it harder for yourself than it has to be, right? And so the earlier you can start with investing any amount of money, it's going to compound, especially if you're starting young, like if you're starting in your 20s, if you're Gen Z starting in your 20s, like you have such an opportunity right now to be able to put away, even if it's just a couple bucks, it's going to be a lot of money 30 years from now, especially as we see volatility in equity markets right now. If we start to see, real estate pull back a little bit, like there are going to be some serious buying opportunities in assets, I think, over this is another conversation for us to have. But if you put that money to work while you're young over 30 years, like you're going to make life a lot easier for yourself.
Yeah, I think too, I don't want to get too far in a sidebar, but there was somebody talking on CNBC that was talking about like the long-term valuations of the housing market based on historical data as it relates to population growth, interest rates, and wealth in the country, that we are not necessarily in bubble territory, but we are within a 3 to 5 year peak. What's going to happen is you're actually going to see the population from a lack of immigration is decreasing population, 1%. you're seeing larger amounts of wealth being saved primarily because of valuations inside homes when interest rates are making the housing market a little bit locked up. But in about 3 to 5 years, you're going to see home prices come down. There's going to be a lot of net new supply. There's going to be lower demand. They're expecting interest rates to stay higher longer. To me, that's super attractive because what it was 10, 15 years ago versus where it is today, it's a whole different market from being able to do that. And to me, this is part of compound interest because it's a corollary play. If I'm a cash flow investor and I see that I can take a block of capital and I can measure it against a 4% rule, or I can measure it against investment in an asset that cash flows, and then that money can be invested. I can run a parallel chart to see which is going to be worth more by my end goal, and then I can make a decision on that. We just had a big conversation about Claire's IRA because it has grown so much. She's 7 years old and there's enough money in it to buy a house, right? I think it 8x from what I put into it when she was 1 and 2 years old. And we're looking, I did the math. If it grows at the same trajectory, right, it's like $3.5 million without putting any more money in. She's 7 years old, by the way.
You can buy a very nice house.
What's that?
You can buy a very nice house.
Well, she could, but if we buy a basic rental property in our market, and then we take that money because it's through a Roth IRA instrument, all of the net profit has to go back into the IRA. It'll be worth $6.9 million, right? So she's got this exponential growth off of it, and then she actually has the tangible asset too, right? That compoundment rate of measuring cash or equity versus cash flow asset, it's I don't want to say it's mind-boggling, but it's very eye-opening at the very least.
Yep.
I feel like I lobbed up a softball for a Gen Z conversation around some of this stuff, and you kind of, instead of swinging, you stepped out of the way, and you're like, nah, I'm not taking this one.
Well, look, I think, where do you start, right? Like, I think there's I think where you start is America is facing a crisis of financial literacy, right? And so you're seeing a lot of Gen Z, a lot of younger people and they're getting a lot of their information and their education from social media, from sources that, may or may not be the best sources to be getting it from. And, I think it creates a big problem for the future because a lot of Gen Z don't understand. We're talking about compound interest. There are so many who are just not even taking advantage of that. But if you go even deeper, I think there is a lot of misinformation out there, and there's a lot of there's a lack of good resources around learning how to participate in equities, participate in real estate, start a business, and then use some of these vehicles that we've been talking about whole life. You mentioned Claire's IRA. All these different vehicles that people could be using. There's not a good enough understanding of how to use them to your benefit. And so, I worry about Gen Z. Where do you think Gen Z currently stands in terms of financial literacy in America?
Well, I really think too, and I feel like we could do a whole session on this, and we probably should. You made a good point of where they're getting their education, right? We were just talking, and we're going to save this for another time, but influencer did one big thing in their life. It earned them a bunch of credibility. And it's good credibility, right? They had this huge trade that worked out really well for them. I'm sure if you looked at it from a risk-reward perspective, it probably had like a 1% probability of working out, but they did it anyways. Yep. And now they're an influencer. And if you are listening to the podcast, you've probably not seen me do my air quotes a couple times today, but there were air quotes around that influencer strategy or status. Yep. Because they're going out and they're saying things, and they know, right, as the influencer, if they say things contrarian to popular belief or established mechanism, they're going to get more attention than going out and saying what the reality of the situation is, because the reality is usually pretty boring. The problem is you see people following them like sheep off a cliff. They're like, oh, this guy's saying I should never buy a home. This guy's saying I should never worry about compound interest. It's a waste. This person's saying I should be all in on crypto. These influencers, really, they're goal is not your success. Their goal is to get you to watch, to respond, to drive up their numbers. And that's what worries me most, even about like our kids. As bad as it is today, how bad is it going to be when our kids are looking at this? Right? When AI is driving all of it and all of their algorithms are designed around engagement, not truthful or successful outcome, right? I don't even know what to do then.
Yep. There's misinformation around how to use some of these strategies and vehicles, and then there's also misinformation around, the mindset that Gen Z has towards money, where they think a lot of this stuff is out of reach to them to begin with, because you have, the news outlets publishing headlines like, the American dream is dead, and
That's what I was
you
thinking.
can't buy a house, and it's impossible to build a business, or this, or the stock market's going to have a lost decade, all these crazy headlines that we see, where a lot of these young kids think it's out of reach, and that's a big problem too. So
It is, because in many cases, the perception of what their reality needs to be is out of their reach. They live in downtown Washington, D.C. at 25 years old. Hey, I've been there. And an entry-level house is, a condo is $350,000. A house is $600,000 or $700,000, right? Yeah, that's out of your reach. You're going to have to move 45 minutes away and maybe commute a little bit to be able to buy the first house for 5 to 7 years, build up the equity in it. Yes, the housing market might get away from you, but in that 5 or 7 years, if you're investing properly, right, the property is going to grow in value. You're going to pay down a little bit of the mortgage on it. You're going to save more money. Your career is going to continue to go in the right direction. And then you're going to be able to get the house where you want. They don't want to hear that, right? They want it exactly how they want it, and they want it right now. You've got to be able to. Now, I don't want to sound like the old fart saying all of this, because I had some of those perceptions when I was that age too, right? I wanted, but then I would go out and work and I would find a way to do it. They can do the same thing. Has it become a little bit harder? Maybe. But is it out of reach? No. Not if you want it.
yep. Yeah, that's the other side of it too, right? Is you could also go out and, this is more relevant for the self-employed listeners, but you can go out and you can make more money, right? And that's another thing that I think a lot of young people feel is out of their reach. But you can build your skill set. You can start a business. You can start a business on a side. Nowadays, it's also possible to earn more money. So if you are the 25-year-old kid in downtown DC, and you wanna live in downtown DC, and you want the more expensive apartment, like that's also within
No, not
reach.
apartment, not apartment. We're talking about buying here. We're talking
We're
about
talking
buying.
about, you condo, right? That's what I'm
Condo.
saying.
There we go.
Condo. So you want the more expensive condo. You can still go out there and increase your income to be able to there are going to be sacrifices you have to make, but you can go and you can increase your income to do that. So it's figuring out what the goal is, and then also some of the mindset around how accessible that goal is. But a lot of people just feel that it's all out of reach. They're told they can't make more money. They're told that
And
that
so they
they
just don't try. Like, I see that all the time. There just is the assumption, because it's not something that I can have instantly without trying. And you know what? I see just as many 40-year-olds and 30-year-olds that think that as I do 20-year-olds or 18-year-olds. So, right, it's not necessarily directly a generational thing.
Yep.
But once you accept that you can't, I feel like Henry Ford, right? If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yep.
And I want to make sure that we acknowledge that it does take work, and that people that have accomplished it often make it sound so easy.
Yep. It
Because
takes
to
time.
them it's in hindsight, right? And they've already done it.
Yeah.
So I
It
would
takes
rather listen to
time.
somebody that's done it and did it the hardest way possible, so I could learn from them on how to do it easier, but not listen to someone that says don't do it because you can't.
It takes time and patience. In addition to the hard work, like you can work around the clock, but it also takes time. Like as again, like this goes back to compound interest. There's a compound interest element to also your career, right? And so as you spend more time mastering, your trade, and you get in your 10,000 hours, like the book, the 10,000 hours to become an expert at something. it gets easier and easier to make, to increase the growth rate on the money that you're making.
You and I should do a podcast on that because we've had different paths,
Yep.
right, along that. I like to jump around every
You like
couple
to
of
make all your
years.
money in one shot right away.
Yeah, I go in, I build up a 7-figure business, I try to exit it as quickly possible, take a few years off, and then go do it again.
Yep. I
Not
prefer to
always
drag
the
it out
best
over
way to
10
keep your
years.
hair or to stay sane, but it works for me.
Yep. That's a good topic.
Okay. Well, I think this turned out to be a great conversation. I know it had a little bit towards the end, a little off of the core topic. Coming back to like Warren Buffett has been quoted that compound interest is the 8th great wonder of the world. If you're not familiar with it and it's not part of your overall financial plan now, you really have to be asking yourself, am I missing something? And at least go do the research. Look at the 4% rule in retirement. Look at the rule of 7. Look at how it affects cash flow, life insurance. Look at the bond market, the treasury markets. Look at how you can take a percentage of your portfolio and put it into an instrument that over a given period of time is a predictable, guaranteed outcome, and how that's going to backflow into your overall financial plan. But then also don't be scared to map out multiple strategies against each other. I don't think enough people do this, and I definitely didn't do it when I was younger. I'd look at, okay, I should have a diversified portfolio that looks like this in chunks. I'm going to make sure that I do that. And that was supposed to be for diversification. But you can still diversify while balancing two different strategies against each other, such as a compound interest bearing bond, treasury note, or annuity, and measure that against a cash investment into an asset that cash flows. And given the period of time that you have to play against each other, which one's worth more? I wish I would have done that earlier because I would have made a lot different decisions 15 years ago. And I don't know how much different things would be. I'd probably be doing the exact same thing I'm doing now, but I might be able to wear my Monopoly hat more often. I just saw it in the basement. I haven't worn it in a while. I love that hat.
A quick plug, because we're talking about that. There's a tool that you can actually do that, what you just described, called Projection Lab. And they don't pay me. They're not a client, no affiliation, but I use it, and it's actually a really cool tool for being able to do exactly that, plugging in different scenarios, different financial models, different investments, and then it shows you over time how it compounds and at different stages of your life, like when you're 35, 45, 55, what each of those investments will be worth, what your total net worth will be, your tax drag, all these different things. So projectionlab.com is a cool tool.
I love that tool primarily because of their back testing against major economic events.
Yep.
I've never seen anybody else do that, which, by the way, I would have died during the Great Depression based on my portfolio allocation, which always drove me nuts. I could never get over that. And I think it's just I'm too equity heavy, but it works for me. But yeah, that's a great tool.
Yep. All right.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Raising Millionaires. We'll see you next week when I have no idea what we're going to talk about. Well, we will be here with smiling faces that you won't see because it's a podcast. Thank you. Talk to you guys later.
Right.
Bye.